The Best Way to Explain It, Episode 10. Back, everybody. Another episode of The Best Way to Explain It, the podcast where we know that in the criminal justice system, sexually based offenses are considered especially heinous. In New York City, the dedicated detectives who investigate these vicious felonies are members of an elite squad known as the Special Victims Unit. These are their stories.
Are these really their stories?
You're supposed to go like dun dun.
Oh, man. Do we need to start this over? I'm
start
sorry.
This entire thing
Jeez.
over.
We're 30 seconds in, and I can't even not screw up.
Oh, man. Well, if we were doing this in
That was
person, I could have
perfect, though.
motioned you with my eyes.
That was perfect.
Hey,
That was
I do what I
hilarious.
can.
I feel like I would be more the guy who is moving boxes while talking to people about someone who was murdered.
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yep, that guy. Or the bartender who remembers everything.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Just perfect recall about...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he gave me a tip of $2.72.
Oh, yeah, that guy. He was wearing a purple sweatshirt with 4 letters on it. Those letters in reverse order were E, T, E, S. I don't know why it said SETI or anything or something like that, but I know that much. What happened?
Wait.
Did he die? Like, no, you're talking to the Special Victims Unit. What else would he have done?
Wait, SETI, that is a street in Bangkok. And it was where Attila the Hun killed 373 people, which is the same apartment number as the killer. It was a message.
Oh my.
Those shows are so predictable, though.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's a special guest or something, they either killed the person or they're the victim.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's well, I never really got into Special Victims Unit, though.
It came out so early that my mom was watching it one day and I watched it and I was like super scared that I was going to be like murdered and raped. So I didn't watch it for a while, and now I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I have nothing else to do for an hour.
Yeah, I'm more of a Criminal Minds guy.
Yeah,
or like
yeah.
I was more of a Criminal Minds guy, or like NCIS I'd watch. But those two were pretty much the only police procedurals, unless you count Psych, which is in a class of its own.
Psych is amazing.
Yeah,
I was more of a Burn Notice kind of guy.
Oh,
Burn Notice was good. Like I didn't realize how cheesy it was at the time, but now that I watch it, it's like super cheesy, but I still love it.
But it's incredibly
Yeah.
cheesy.
Yeah.
It's like it's cheesy in all the right ways.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't bug me.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
I don't know.
Well,
because it's their take on a police procedural without the police part of it. It's like how spies approach it. And
well, it was kind of a MacGyver. It was a reboot of
Right.
MacGyver, just different,
Right.
in a way.
Except good, not like the latest reboot.
Ouch.
It's not good.
Burn
Anyways,
Notice.
like I said, welcome back to The Best Way to Explain It. And so this is episode 10, and I'm shocked we're at episode 10. This feels like it's gone quickly.
We are just ramming through all these episodes.
We really are.
Yeah.
We're gonna run out of stuff to talk about here.
Yeah,
soon.
we'll have educated the world on everything by the time.
Every single
by this
topic.
time next year, we will have discussed literally everything.
Yeah, that's it. So, what do you think you've learned in your 10 episodes as a podcast? Well, 9 and I don't know, a 10th episode as a podcaster.
Great question. I've learned that even though I'm working like a 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5, I can still do something outside of that to improve myself, which is cool. And I've always wanted to be that side hustle kind of guy but
right.
I never realized how easy it would be. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but like, it's super easy to just write up a podcast, go on, talk about it to an imaginary audience, and then, sit back and say, hey, I'm doing something outside of work.
Do you know what's incredible though?
What's up?
I do all the work.
Hey, that's true. You do a lot of
no
it.
joke. It is pretty easy. Like once you get everything up and running, the bus kind of drives itself.
Yeah.
Then all you have to figure out is how to get people to listen to it.
Yep.
Which is it's a challenge in and of itself, but something I'm enjoying trying to figure out.
Yeah.
So like for me, I think time management has been really, really crucial in just figuring out having that constant deadline of, okay, we need 2 episodes every week, and we have to have those done. So this becomes priority the closer and closer it gets to a Monday or a Friday.
Definitely.
And that like really kicks you in the butt if you're slacking, and then because then you'll end up with a subpar episode if you don't take the proper amount of time to do your research and everything, and that's not something I ever want to put out.
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely changed the way I research things too.
Right.
If I didn't find the answer, I would typically stay on the same website when I was doing a report for college or high school even, and I would try and find it on that website. Now I'm just like, okay, second link on Google. What can I find?
And occasionally the second page.
Oh man, charting uncharted territory there.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah,
it's scary once you get there. But,
that's awesome.
So all of that talk about the work it took to start this podcast has made me want to relax a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And Breckan, you're going to be talking us through the second episode in your series on vices.
Ooh.
And Breckan, so what are you going to tell us today?
Best way to explain it, vice. Today I am talking about alcohol, which is
okay.
It's one of my 2 vices that I have. So.
Yep.
First, Scott and I started out with coffee, and then we moved into coffee and alcohol. And those were our Fridays. We would spend about 4 hours together chatting and fixing the world's problems through alcohol and coffee, and the dangerous combination of both.
Oh yeah, that's not a great combo. You want to stay sober.
The caffeine tends to allow the alcohol to hit you even harder.
Do you know how that works? Why that chemically does what it does?
Yeah. So what caffeine does it opens your pathways in your brain for other chemicals to dump in. So when you're consuming alcohol and caffeine, let's say you took a Jaeger bomb and you got the Red Bull and the Jägermeister. Well, you take that, the caffeine's going to shoot that alcohol to your brain, and that's why you get pretty messed up doing Jaeger bombs or any bomb with a caffeinated substance. Yeah.
Way more than you would if you were to just do a shot of the alcohol, right?
Yep. Yeah,
okay.
That's
interesting.
That's how it's been explained to me by someone who went through biology and organic chemistry, so I'm going to take their word for it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, so where do you want to start?
Let's start at the beginning.
That makes sense.
In the beginning, there was God, and the Word was with God. Just kidding. We're going to start at the beginning of...
the Gospel of God.
We're going to start at the beginning of...
Jesus did turn water into wine.
Yeah, that's true. We're going to start with kind of where this all came from. And I swear, I talk about alcohol all the time at work. We all say like, oh, it's beer 30 right when we get sick of working at 9:30 in the morning. Maybe we have a problem where I work. Or
you're just like Mad Men.
Yeah. Yeah, we all have a decanter of whiskey and a bottle of Stolichnaya vodka.
Yeah, right.
Yep. And some people think it's the devil's water, and some people really do have a bottle in their desk, not necessarily at my work. I haven't seen anyone with it, but I wouldn't doubt it.
Do you think that's okay at your work? Like, do you think your bosses would care?
It's technically not allowed. And by technically, I mean you'll probably get fired if you're caught.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I don't do it. I just wait till 4:30 when I can sneak away. But whatever your feelings on alcohol, whether or not you think it's the devil's water or if you use it for daily medication, a lot of people around me don't really know how it's made or how it's worked. I started drinking at the age of 3.
Right.
Just kidding. Beer didn't taste good back then. I did chug a beer on accident when I was 3. I thought it was a pop, and my dad picks up his beer can after I do it, and he's like, "What? Why is my beer so light? Who's been drinking my beer?" And then I walk over to my mom and I go, "Blucky." And now that's a family inside joke. So now everyone that listens to this podcast knows about my family's inside joke.
Nice. I'm sure. I think my brother actually, he swears he tried beer like around 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe him though.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like, you either start when you're 21 or your parents were like, "Here, 12-year-old Jimmy, have a beer with me."
Right.
Not really. I'm sure there are other people. Like, a lot of people start in high school because that's when their parents either don't care or their friends find a secret stash.
Sure.
Or a buyer. But yeah.
True.
I'm actually dumbfounded. Like, a huge portion of our population in America really doesn't know how alcohol is made or the process to produce alcohol. And that's kind of one reason why I'm doing this podcast. Another reason I'm doing this podcast is because of our good friend Drew, who left a suggestion at thebestwaytoexplainit.com/suggestions where
Nice.
where he asked us to discuss different alcohols, how alcohol is produced, and what's the difference between a bunch of alcohols. So since I have all that process memorized, we're just going to run through it.
Yeah, shout out to Drew.
Yeah.
Drew was a great roommate for 3 years of my life.
And now he's married.
Congrats, Drew.
Yeah. So
great wedding.
So I'm gonna, it was a great wedding. Plenty of alcohol consumed at it too.
There was.
We're gonna start in the journey of beer making. Beer making is a little more complicated than making liquor. So we're gonna run through that, and then I'll kind of disclaim at the end what the difference between that and then liquor distillation is. Should be pretty quick, so I can answer all your 1,000 questions at the end that you told me you had.
Be prepared.
Oh, I am. I've been preparing since I was 3.
All right.
We start.
Tell me how alcohol is made.
We start with beer because like I said, it's a little more complicated than liquor. Beer requires 4 main ingredients: so water, grain or malt, hops, and yeast. And then breweries are always clever, and they say that there's a 5th ingredient. Do you know what the 5th ingredient is, Scott?
I feel like I should.
It's love.
Okay, I was about to guess that, but
yeah.
I was like, no, this isn't grandma's apple pie.
No, love is also in beer. But it holds true for all alcohols, but I'll discuss why liquor is a little bit different. Hops typically aren't found in liquor.
Okay.
Those are strictly a beer thing for flavoring and for what was believed at one time to be a natural preservative within the beer.
Mm-hmm.
That's where IPAs come from, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I'll talk about that in a second too. To make beer, you must first boil the malt or grain in water to release the sugars made from the starches within the malt or grain. And then the flavors of the grains also come out when you boil it. It's kind of like steeping tea.
Okay.
The process that I'm describing here is called mashing, and just like tea steeps in the hot water in your tea vessel or mug, the mash, which is the crushed grain used for brewing, steeps in the water, releasing its transformed starches into sugars. I just repeated myself. After the mash is finished, it releases all those flavors it's time to lauter what is called the wort, which is that liquid from mashing all this grain.
I just thought of, you haven't seen Rick and Morty yet, have you?
I've seen some episodes.
I don't know if you saw the episode where they talk about how to make what's it called?
Oh, I've heard you run through it before.
Right.
Yeah.
Gosh, I wish I could remember but it just says like a bunch of random nonsense words.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like when you're saying louder the wort.
Yeah. So lauter basically just means filtering, and then the wort, like I said, is that liquid that.
So when I make
produced.
coffee, I'm gonna say, well, what kind of louders are you using?
Filters.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just to be, super hipster.
Yeah. Just to be weird.
Yep.
You do pretty well at that. All right. So lautering is when the wort is filtered and transferred into the boiling kettle. It eliminates any large particles that may interfere with enjoyment of the beverage or that could burn and leave a bad taste within the beer. It's typically done in something called the lautering tun, which is the same vessel as the mash tun. Basically, it's just a giant thing holding the boiling water and the somewhat cooled down water that you're filtering out all the particles from. You just had to make the Rick and Morty reference, didn't you?
Then you take the schleep and wrangle it.
So after mashing and lautering are completed, we move on to the sparge. The sparge is the process of rinsing the grains of the sugars.
Who comes up with these names?
I don't know. A bunch of monks in the 1500s, probably. It's done by.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The sparge is done by either two methods, either the batch or the fly. Fly sparging is the letting out of the water from the bottom slowly and then adding hot water from the top at the same rate. And then batch sparging is the draining of the mash/lauter tun as quickly as possible, and then adding more water, mixing, letting it settle, and draining again. Following along? Understand?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, cool.
Oh, okay. It came to me. The Rick and Morty is how to make plumbus.
Plumbus.
Yeah.
We will not be consuming plumbus for this episode.
If you guys want to know what I'm talking about, just go on YouTube and say Rick and Morty plumbus, and there's probably like a 2-minute clip, and it's just the funniest thing I've ever seen.
I'm guessing it's spelled Plumbus.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. Continue.
So,
I will not interrupt with Rick and Morty anymore.
So after the plumbus has been lautered, just kidding. After the mash has been lautered and sparged, we begin the boil. The wort is brought up to a boil where hops are added to develop the bitter notes at prescribed rates and times. Miller Lite hops their beer 3 times at different points because they want the best flavors of pea to be brought out in their beer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a knock on Miller Lite?
Yeah. It's really a knock on a lot of light beers, but other light beers don't hop their beers as much, so I figured I'd just get my jab at Miller Lite while I can, even though it's my choice in light beer.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you may as well drink hoppy pea if you're going to drink pea.
Yeah. It's 1 letter off from happy pea, so.
True.
The earlier the hops are added, the more bitter a beer will be. So if you're drinking a really bitter IPA with a high IBU, International Bitterness Unit, they most likely hop their beer heavily and very early in the boil. If the hops are added later, the hop flavors and aromas will be prevalent, but not necessarily the bitterness. And as I just said, IPAs, so if you're drinking a very citrusy IPA, that's coming from a lot of the hop flavor that you find. Especially citrusy hops. I think their Cascade hops are a good citrusy hop. I may be wrong about that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. We make up stuff all the time here.
Yeah. We usually do.
That's how we do the show.
Yeah, this is off the top of my head. I'm not reading anything. During the boil, the wort will be condensed to make the desired amount of beer. So you'll boil off whatever water you don't want, whatever water to produce as much beer as you want. Additionally, chemicals that could taint the beer are evaporated off at this point. So there are some chemicals that within the beer could make it taste bad or could even be poisonous if it's distilled or aged or anything. So they want to get all those chemicals off. So they keep boiling until they're comfortable with whatever they're going to allow you to poison your own brain with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question then about the IPAs. So, okay, you say like the citrusier ones, or I don't know if that's a word, but the more citrusy ones are going to be the hops that are added later.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So you get like certain like on the label or whatever. So you have like a grapefruit IPA or something.
Yeah.
How do they make it a specific flavor of citrus? Do they add something for that, or is that just they create the beer a certain way and they taste it and they're like, oh, that's kind of grapefruit?
Do you know
what I mean?
Yeah, there's two ways they can do it. They can either flavor it with a fruit juice concentrate, or they can throw that fruit juice concentrate in with the wort and then allow it to ferment, which I'll get to in a hot second. Okay. And then the other way is to do exactly what you just said. They have a certain combination of grains and yeast and grains, yeast, and hops that produce a very citrusy flavor. And you'll see that a lot in some of the better microbreweries, because they can they experiment and then they'll try and figure out how to make something taste like a grapefruit one. But if it says like blood orange IPA or grapefruit IPA, that might mean that they're adding fruit flavor to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's nuts though.
Or they can add like citrus peels to the wort. You can add stuff to the wort other than the grain and the hops to really bring out a flavor. So Blue Moon adds oranges, and that fruit sugar breaks down just like anything else, as I'm getting to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, gosh, that's like blows my mind that the people who don't add the, like the actual like citrus ingredients, but just like do it using the hops and grains and what's the other one? Hops, grains, malt. No.
Well, malt, but malt's a grain. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But that's just like,
because
like if you taste those things on their own, they're not gonna be citrusy.
Yeah.
But because of chemistry, we're able to bring out those flavors, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a science that if you get into the big leagues, you can be very dedicated and have an amazing career just making really good beer. I toured the New Belgium Brewing Company in Fort Collins.
Colorado?
Yeah, in Fort Collins. And they're really cool. They're like a nonprofit beer brewing company, so they do a lot of donations. It's really cool. But one interesting thing is they have so many strains of yeast for fermenting their beer that they can change the flavor of a beer because of the strain of yeast that they use. And I am getting to like what yeast does in a second.
Right. Okay, that's that's cool. Like, well, it's sort of like what coffee does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they get the fruitiness just from, roasting and like growing it a certain way.
Yep.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's really cool. So after you're done boiling your beer, you want to cool it. So you use a wort chiller to cool your beer. If the chilling isn't done properly, you can develop DMS or dimethyl sulfide, which is not good in the most like plain way to say it. I didn't get a whole lot of time to figure out what dimethyl sulfide really does, but it's a very highly flammable liquid that does not taste good, and it can be put into your beer or liquor while you're distilling if you don't chill it quick enough. So chilling is performed for the addition of yeast because yeast is a single-cell organism, and this process is called pitching. Were you about to say something?
Okay. Yeah. Well, two things. First of all, wort is spelled W-O-R-T, so in case any of you guys are grossed out at this point, it's W-O-R-T. And then second, so dimethyl sulfide, it sounds like poisonous.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, so you can find sulfides in like wines and stuff, so not necessarily just because it says dimethyl sulfide.
I don't know.
Let me see here. I have something pulled up on it. It just comes out of the brewing process, and it has a cabbage-like smell, and is just all in all disgusting. It's produced by treating hydrogen sulfide with excess methanol over an aluminum oxide catalyst, if you were ever wanting to produce it. It's also used in petroleum refining and some other stuff. I'm not seeing anything about poison, though. Safety, it's highly flammable and irritant to eyes and skin. It is harmful if swallowed and has an unpleasant odor at even extremely low concentrations. Its ignition temperature is 205 degrees Celsius. So yeah, it is poisonous. It doesn't say, like, deadly.
Right.
But you want to make sure that you're not getting that in there. So you need to chill it quickly enough. You also want to chill it so that you can add that single-cell organism yeast for the actual production of alcohol. Because right now we don't even have beer. We just have the wort, the chilled wort. So pitching is performed in a fermenter. Aerating it is recommended to fuel the energy of the yeast so that it consumes as much sugar in the wort as possible. And then yeast is added to beer because yeast is the only thing that can create alcohol in terms of beer making or drinking. So we add the yeast, and what it does is it basically acts like Pac-Man, chomping on all the sugars within the tank or the fermenter, and then it turns CO2 and alcohol into byproducts. So the breweries that I've toured, they always say that the yeast farts CO2 and pees alcohol, which the child in me thinks it's pretty funny that, like, we're drinking yeast, pee, and farts.
Yum.
Tasty. And this,
those of you who drinking a nice beer right now, enjoy it. Yeah.
So the beer at this point is in full form and can be enjoyed, although some people like to barrel age or play with their beer after this stage. We'll just assume that this is the end. It's fermented. You can add water to it. You can do all sorts of stuff. But this is really the production of alcohol and, in its most basic form, beer. You can bottle it at this point and sell it as long as you go through the rigorous process of becoming a, beer manufacturer.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yeah.
So do the light beers, do they ever add anything to the water?
Add anything to the water?
It was a joke.
Oh. Ha.
Because they don't have flavor.
Ha.
Like my dad always says, no one has ever tasted a light beer.
Yeah. Yep. The brewery tour that I went on in Colorado, we hit up 3 different breweries, but the first place we stopped, the guy explained the reason why temperature means so much to tasting things, which is why Coors Light wants you to drink it as close to frozen as possible, because then you don't taste it. You just chug it, and then you chug another one, and that's how their business transactions work. Yeah.
Well, right. Well, because that's what they recommend. If you have bad coffee, you drink it as hot as possible.
Yeah.
Because a good coffee is going to taste good at lower temperatures.
Yep.
Whereas, like, bad coffee, you can choke down while it's still hot because you're not going to taste it as much.
Yep.
And so,
yeah.
There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah. There's a huge similarity because it's all the tasting mechanisms of your body. So we discussed beer. I talked about how it can be barrel aged, but I wanted to touch on liquors. Liquors are somewhat different, considering all the parts that beer is made up of. Take out the hops, you've got the grain, and then once you're done with the fermentation, you have what's called the wash. The wash is the spirit that comes directly out of fermentation and typically has about 10% alcohol. And that's typically 30% below what you want your spirit to be for maximal tasting and effect if you're going for effect. Now is when the process of distillation occurs. So distillation is commonly done in two ways: the industrial scale stills or batch scale stills. You have vodka, which is disgusting. That's done on industrial scale, as well as gin. Gin is done on industrial scale, but I actually like gin. And then you have whiskeys and brandies, as well as tequila, which are made in small batch stills to develop more flavors, soak up more, or allow for interesting flavors to combine within these small stills. They don't want the big, like, Bartones vodka flavors of death and hate.
Dead puppies.
Yeah.
Right. So what does a still look like?
It can look like anything. What you'll usually see if you look up a still, you'll see a copper pot still, which is a small batch still, and it looks like a giant boiling pot with a tube coming out the top, typically a pyramid or a cone funneling to that tube, and the tube would be copper too, and then that tube's going to branch up and then down into a separate pot, or there are multiple different stills out there. It just depends on the different ones. I believe Lagavulin, Scotch maker, has copper pot stills, and it's hard to describe really what they look like, but basically just a giant cone with a bulb at the bottom, and then the pipe running down to collect the evaporated alcohol. So what the still does is it boils the wash and evaporates the alcohol. And I know what you're thinking, like, oh no, how did they catch the alcohol? They're boiling all the alcohol off.
My alcohol.
Yeah, not the alcohol. Well, alcohol has a lower boiling temperature than water. So when you're boiling the wort, you're boiling it in between those two temperatures and boiling off the alcohol to be collected at the top of the still, and then through that pipe that slopes down, it's collected in a separate area to produce the spirit. And that spirit's going to be pretty high proof, depending on how well you've calculated everything and made your temperatures work out. So it concentrates it. It allows the distiller to get their spirit up to proof, and then cutting and spiking is what they'll do to get it within the 40 to 60% alcohol range, or 80 to 120 proof. If the spirit is unaged, like gin or vodka, then the spirit can be bottled immediately after distilling. But if the spirit is aged, like whiskey or tequila or brandy, although some tequilas aren't aged, it's put into barrels to age. So
okay,
yeah.
So what's cutting and spiking? What is that?
So cutting and spiking. Cutting would be cutting the alcohol content, so that would be the addition of water, and then spiking would be raising the alcohol content. So you
add more of that.
Yeah, you add more
alcohol.
of the evaporated alcohol. So you might just have like a very base vodka that has no flavor whatsoever, and you'll add that to a whiskey or something that didn't quite produce the amount of spirit or the proof of spirit that you want. Which is it's pretty cool. That's the name of the Cut Spike Distillery in Omaha. So
that Lucky Bucket is right by.
Yeah.
So how do they test the amount of alcohol? Like, what's the instrument they use? Do they just look at it under a microscope?
Well, if you've watched moonshiners, they can just shake it up and then they'll proof it by eyesight. Or they have specific instruments to measure the alcohol content of something. I'm forgetting what those are called, though.
Okay. That's fine.
Alcohol measuring device. Let's see what Google comes up with. Alcohol proof measuring device.
It's just going to be the breathalyzer.
It's a hydrometer. It looks like.
I feel like I've heard of that before.
Yeah. So it
could just analyzes
the chemicals or possibly an electrical current that runs through, and see how much dampening or catalyzing effect it has on the electric current.
Nice.
Yeah. How's that for quick Googling?
Hey, well done.
Yeah.
We do need that producer.
Yeah.
So if anybody's interested, just email me at scott@thebestwaytoexplainit.com. We will pay you
2 crisp high fives.
At least as much as you're getting paid to produce our podcast right now.
Wow. Interesting.
So we'll pay you as much as our producer is getting paid right now.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, producer guy.
Yep.
So you've got the unaged spirit, and you want to throw it through some carbon filters or directly bottle it. If you throw it through carbon filters, you're going to have a much better spirit. It's going to be cleaner. It's not going to taste rough, like I mentioned, Barton's. Typically, the better spirits are filtered more than the non-filtered, although there is sort of a cutoff. Sometimes filtering isn't everything. If you ask the question, can I filter my Barton's vodka to have better vodka? My response is yes, but vodka is still disgusting. Why are you doing that? And
that's fair.
Just kidding. It has its uses for like cleaning off things.
Right. Yeah.
But you can
run inside of my car can run on.
Yeah, you can filter your Barton's to have better vodka. Just throw it through a Brita filter, because those are carbon filters, and it'll take all the nasty stuff out there.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I learned that at a distillery in Colorado, in Denver. It's called State 38. They produce agave-based spirits. You can't call them tequila technically, because of the legalities of where tequila can be made. It can only be made in Mexico.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that too. When whiskeys are aged, along with all the others that I've been explaining, in barrels, the barrels are charred on the inside to develop certain flavors and to help the whiskey filter more. So when you char wood, it creates coal or charcoal. So then you charcoal or carbon filter your whiskey by aging it in barrels, as well as the character of the barrel is mixed with the whiskey. That's why you get like an oaky whiskey or a oaky añejo tequila. And
peaty.
Yeah. Well, peaty is a different thing. That has to do with actually peating your whiskey. So you'll throw it in the barrel, and then you'll also throw peat in the barrel with it, and then that will soak up. It'll help filter, but it'll also impart the peaty flavor, the very smoky. If you've had Lefroy or Lagavulin, I believe they're both very peaty whiskeys.
So why not throw his brother in?
I hate you.
Oh man, I apologize. To be honest, to be completely honest, I kind of hated myself and was disgusted with myself. The words, as they came out of my mouth, they tasted bad.
Hey, I forgive you now. I forgive you after that.
That makes up for it.
Yeah. So to follow along with whiskey, It also happens with tequila. Whiskey is characterized by its age, and the rule of thumb is the longer it is aged, the more expensive and delicious it will be. It doesn't always work, as a Macallan 12, I believe, is better than like a Laphroaig 14 or 15 due to the peating processes, as I discussed earlier, used by Laphroaig. I don't like my Scotch smoky. I want it to taste either like chocolate, like Macallan does, or like fruit, like Glenmorangie does. Yeah. So now that I've finished my very brief explanation of how liquors and beer are made, go ahead with your questions that you got for me, man.
Okay, so you talked about aging beer too, right?
Yep.
Is that a similar thing to aging whiskey?
Yes.
Obviously, just for not as long.
Yep. Yeah, you'll take the beer and then you'll put it in. Sometimes it'll be a used whiskey barrel or it'll be a new barrel, and you'll age it there, and that'll allow it to it'll overproof it, so it'll be more than just your regular like 5-6% alcohol. It'll be more like 10%, and sometimes that has to do more with the fermentation process, or actually I think it has everything to do with the fermentation process, but they'll typically make those beers a higher alcohol percentage. Right. And then it'll filter, it'll smooth out, you'll get a really smooth beer, and it'll also take on the characteristics of the barrel. Okay. And they'll age it anywhere from like 4 to 18 months, depending on how bad they want it to taste.
Right. Okay, so you talked about beer and liquor. Yeah. So how is wine different? So wine obviously uses grapes. Yep. But is it just grapes instead of, wheat? Yeah, grapes instead of grain or malt. Basically, they take the sugars from the grape juice. That is, they smash them. Sometimes you'll see the people like squishing the grapes with their feet and having a grand old time. And like Grape Lady Falls? Yeah, yeah. And look up Grape Lady Falls on YouTube. You won't regret it. And they'll take that grape juice and they'll use the same fermentation process where they throw yeast in there to create alcohol from the grape sugars, and then they'll age that in barrels. Or if it's a white wine, they won't age it. It'll be just straight from the fermenter. Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. So white wines, they'll never be old? Typically, no. That's why they're sweeter compared to red wines, typically. Gotcha. Yeah. That was my next question. Why are some wines drier than others? Yeah, well, it depends on strains of grapes as well. Old vine, Spanish wines tend to be very dry. I love those kinds of wines. Oh, yeah, I love a dry wine way more than a sweet one. Yeah, it's just more sophisticated, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Like, I chug Moscato out of a bottle. I drink Cabernet Sauvignon out of a glass. Right. Like a classy person. Yeah. While I'm munching on McDonald's or something. Right. Okay, so champagne just has how's the carbonation added? The natural waters in a region in France, they're a natural spring water, and all champagne must come from France. Otherwise, you've got a bubbly Moscato or a bubbly something else. But those. So chances are I haven't had a champagne. Chances are you haven't, unless it's labeled champagne, and then you probably have. I don't know. Okay, I don't think I have. Yeah, but you can have a dry champagne, and you can have a dry white wine, but they aren't aged. It has everything to do with the grapes that they use. And then possibly the yeast that they use to ferment it as well. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yep. Okay. Another question about beer. What is the difference between a lager and an ale? Because I know that those are the two families of beer. So you got lagers and ales, and I'm going to have to look this up. I was taught it, and I don't remember. I remember reading it on a menu at one point. Yeah. But I can't for the life of me remember, because I like ales better than lagers. Yeah. Okay. And I don't know why. Okay, now I remember. So it has everything to do with how they're fermented. All right, so you've got a top fermented ale or a bottom fermented lager. Right. Yeah. So
lagers, or I'll start with ales actually. You'll throw the yeast on top of a warmer wort, and then the yeast will go through and it'll eat all the sugars. Whereas with lagers, you'll put it in cold, like a Pilsner, a Bock, or an Oktoberfest is a lager. Mm-hmm. And you put the yeast on the bottom and then filter the wort through the yeast, and then the yeast eats it through that filtering time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, yeah. And so what does that mean for flavor then? Like what kind of flavors is that going to...
Oh, man. Asking some in-depth questions here.
I told you, man.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's something that I need to research a little bit more.
Because I know I like ales.
With your ales, you can have like a stout is an ale still, or an IPA is an ale. So it's not necessarily a flavor thing. It's more just like I don't know.
Classification.
Yeah, classification. It looks like a lot of the spicier beers are more on the lager side. So you've got the Pilsner, the Bock, and the Oktoberfest. Those are very spicy beers compared to the ale, which has more of the fruity or the chocolatey, the wheat flavors, a nut brown, some hoppy flavors with the IPAs, and then an English stout Bock, an ESB. Those are also ales.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was just wondering because, like, I imagine that there's a lot of information in knowing whether or not what you're ordering is a lager or an ale.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah. Okay, interesting. That was something that was on the tip of my tongue. Okay.
Yeah.
So, for the last question, unless I think of one while you're answering this, is, and this is actually a really long question, for each liquor, what cocktail is your go-to?
Ooh.
So I'll just run you through, my questions. So if you're gonna get, what are good cocktails for like brandy, or do you just kind of drink brandy pure?
Brandy is more of if it's gonna be in a cocktail, it's gonna be in a specialty cocktail. Now, there are some certain mixes, but I wouldn't call them cocktails. I would just call them mixes. Like, you put brandy in apple cider and then warm it up, because warm brandy is really good. Like, you're actually supposed to warm brandy. And then...
well, yeah, because I see, like on TV, they'll, like, put a lighter underneath it.
Yep.
Like underneath the goblet or whatever.
Yeah, and then it'll be in a special glass that uses the warmth of your hand to heat up the liquid.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's what a brandy glass is. So there are certain cocktails, but I stay away from brandy, not because I don't like it or anything, just because it's fruity and it's kind of out there. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Gin.
I
know you like gin.
Yes. So
you might even prefer to just drink this.
I
like
prefer
if it's a good gin.
I prefer a good gin stirred, or really it's spun in a stirring glass with ice to chill it, not shaken like our misguided friend James Bond likes to drink his vodka. But some classic cocktails, including gin, are the Negroni. It's a very earthy, interesting cocktail. I am not a huge fan of it, but I'll still drink it. And that's mixed with vermouth and Campari. I believe it's equal parts, all three. Could be wrong about that. I'm going off the top of my head.
That's fine.
And then the classic English martini is gin, not vodka. You can do it with vermouth, but I prefer it without vermouth. Vermouth is a fortified wine, and the flavor of it is hard to describe. I just don't like it. It's bitter and makes it hard to chug a martini. Whereas gin has these, like, a lot of people say it's a Christmas tree, but really it's juniper berry flavors, and then a lot of other herbal flavors, because gin is one of the less regulated liquors out there. So you can throw...
Oh, now I gotta drink it.
You can throw one of or something in there like lemon peels and some other herbs or I don't know, flowers in there to get a certain flavor to come out in your gin.
Right. Now I have to drink it.
Yeah. So you got the Negroni, the what's called the Churchill Martini, which is where you order a martini stirred and no vermouth, and then you look in the direction of France and you hold your glass up in the air and say, "'Tis enough vermouth for me."
Good to know. Take notes, guys.
Yeah. So some good gins that I know of. Hendrick's is kind of the classic top shelf gin that you're gonna find at your local sports bar or something.
Top shelf, real quick.
Yeah.
For the
top
listeners.
shelf is the best that you're going to get. It's their best liquor, so it's gonna Whereas the Well liquor is their cheapest stuff. They throw it in there like Coke and whiskey, or their gin and tonic. That Hendrick's isn't going to be there.
Right.
Hendrick's is just kind of like your normal gin. There's nothing special about it. It's just smoother than regular Tanqueray or anything.
Sure.
Then you have Martin Miller's. Martin Miller's makes two different gins. You have their regular, and then you have their overproof gin, and they do taste different. One of them, the first one, the regular gin, is it's a very junipery flavor, whereas the overproof, it's about 90 proof, so 5% over the regular gin, and it tastes less junipery and a little more herbal. It has a little more bite if you don't cut it with water. But yeah, that's my gin.
That's gin.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you really like gin. Okay, next, what about rum?
Rum. So rum is one of the coolest liquors because it doesn't take long to age it. There are so many good rums out there. I wouldn't go Bacardi unless you're mixing it. I wouldn't go Captain Morgan unless you're mixing it. But I love a good rum and Coke. You've got Hurricanes. You've got Mai Tais, I believe. And these are all kind of umbrella drinks. You sip them on the beach. They're really refreshing. And then if you're going to drink rum straight, Zaya rum, I believe it's 12 years old. And yeah, it's delicious. Basically, rum is made from sugar cane. So it's pure sugar. And then when it's fermented, it just acts very quickly and it ages super quick, which is why Bacardi can just turn out a ton of rum, and that's why it's super popular. And it can also be aged. So if you age it, you only have to age it for about like 4 years compared to other liquors to develop a really full flavor. And then there are some rums out there that are like 25-year rums, but instead of being like $5,000 like a normal 25-year Scotch, you have it's only like $50 to $60.
Okay.
So yeah, rum is really cool. It goes well with any fruit juice.
It's a good mixer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I found.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Tequila.
So tequila is really interesting. I'm going to run through, this might be a little longer than the rest.
That's fine.
But tequila comes in a variety of flavors, from a Blanco, which is unaged tequila, which is agave plant is the base instead of grain. The sugars are broken down and then they distill it and bottle it right away. And then you have the Reposado, I believe, is the Reposado is aged from like 9 to 12 months. And then you move from the Blanco to the Reposado to the Añejo. And the Añejo is anywhere from 1 to 2 years. And then the extra Añejo is aged 2 or longer years. So tequila old fashions are basically just an old fashioned made with tequila instead of whiskey, which obviously we'll get into in a second. But the tequila that they use is 100-year or it's not 100-year aged tequila, but it's called 100 años or whatever that is in Spanish. And I forget. I haven't counted in Spanish in a long time, but it's 100-year old fashioned is kind of what they're playing on, and it's super good. Basically, an old fashioned is the liquor, the base liquor, typically whiskey, obviously tequila can happen too, and bitters, sugar, and optional splash of soda. And then you garnish it with an orange and sometimes a cherry. They use a tequila soaked cherry in the tequila old fashioned, which is pretty awesome. Yeah. Other than that, the margaritas, as I said before, super simple. If you're just looking to like try out tequila and see how it tastes or something, try a margarita somewhere. Guaranteed you'll like them. Tequila Sunrises. Those are cool, not just because they taste really good. They're orange juice, grenadine, and tequila, but they look cool because the way you put orange juice in with the tequila and then you drop grenadine in, it creates this kind of level that looks like a sunrise. Obviously, that's where the name comes from, and that's super cool. And that's about it that I can think of for tequila.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's really good. Yeah. Okay. Something I think would be cool is if for each of these, just in the show notes, put your favorite brand and then your favorite cocktail.
Yeah.
Just to give people, if they feel lost at like a bar and they want to get a mixed drink or something.
Definitely.
Just give them a little bit of a. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely throw that
you can
in the
check out
show notes.
Yeah, the best way to explain it.com/10. Yeah, we're in the double digits now.
Boom.
All right. So I know you don't like it, but vodka, if you had to drink vodka.
Vodka, I mean, vodka sodas are cool if you're, those are just kind of the basic drinks though.
If you're into that sort of thing.
And those are garnished with lemon, so you're basically drinking like a soda water with lemon and then vodka. Vodka mixes well with just about anything. Vodka is in Elk Creek Swamp Waters, which anyone that has gone to the bars in Lincoln knows that Sandy's sells some awesome stuff that'll put you on your butt real quick.
Oh, man.
But yeah, Elk Creek Swamp Waters are good. Those combine gin, vodka, orange juice, lime juice, and soda water. And I'm trying to think of what else I like vodka in. Vodka's
is there a brand that
shot.
you think is good?
Grey Goose vodka is pretty good. I haven't really ventured into any sort of vodka, like craft vodka, just because it all tastes the same. Basically, it just tastes like alcohol. Why
waste money on that when you could get,
whiskey?
Else. Right. Which I think you're done talking about vodka. Yep. So finally, whiskey.
All right.
So tell us.
Might as well just start
a few different
podcast.
Categories.
Yeah.
There's a few different categories, but you can just be brief, and maybe we can revisit this topic later.
Yeah, we'll definitely hit on whiskey just as a separate topic, and maybe because people might not listen to this episode, we'll hit whiskey later. But whiskey falls into a few categories. You've got Scotch, which is kind of the creme de la creme of whiskey. You've got Irish whiskey, you've got bourbon, you've got Tennessee whiskey, which is just Jack Daniels as far as I know. You've got American whiskey like Tin Cup, and I may be blanking on a few others. Canadian whiskey, yeah. All these are made. Rye and Canadian are kind of the same. Rye whiskey and Canadian whiskey are at least 51% mash of rye.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. Is there a just like there's Japanese whiskey, isn't there?
Yeah. They've been making Japanese, they call them scotches because they're single malt and made the same way, but really they're not from Scotland. Scotch is a completely different thing. That being said, some of the Japanese whiskeys are supposed to be the best like mid-level whiskeys in the world. So yeah, Japanese whiskey uses, well, the Japanese scotches use barley just like regular scotch, and it all has to come from the same place. It has to be sourced from the same like barley field to be considered a single malt. So yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorite brands?
Some of my favorite brands of whiskey. So I talked about the Macallan, and that is my favorite above all. I've had their rare cask, I've had their 18, their 15, and their 12. And I'm pretty sure I've bought you all. So. Pretty much. You haven't bought me the rare cask. That's like $36 a glass.
Oh yeah. But I had the double cask.
Yeah. And I guess I've had that too. But
yeah. That's a 12.
That whiskey tastes like chocolate, and it's amazing. Another scotch, the Macallan is a scotch. Another scotch I like is Glenmorangie. Glenmorangie is delicious as well. It tastes like honey and fruits, and it's kind of like a craft coffee in the way it's flavored. But it doesn't have like coffee notes. It has like delicious whiskey notes. Yeah. And so moving into other things, I do enjoy Jack Daniels. Typically I'll mix it with Coke though. I will drink it neat from time to time or on the rocks. Bullet and Bullet Rye are two very good bourbons / ryes, and
there's Jim Beam, obviously.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about them. And I use them mostly to mix. So I use Bullet Bourbon and Bullet Rye to both mix my old fashions that I make at home. I'll make my own simple syrup. I'll throw that and some bitters, and then the whiskey in the cup, stir it around, pour it out into my rocks glass, and then garnish with an orange peel, and they are delicious.
Have you started doing maraschino cherries?
No, I haven't, but those are good.
I bought some of those this summer.
I've done that a few times. We also have soda water in my fridge, so sometimes I'll splash a little soda water if I want to cut it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's super good. Let's see. I'm getting distracted by old fashions now.
That could be an episode.
Yeah. Dickel is what my favorite bar in Omaha uses to produce old fashions. So obviously Dickel's
that's a rye.
Favorite. Yeah, it's a Dickel rye is a good whiskey. Trying to think of others.
You like Jameson?
Jameson, yeah. Jameson's really good. It's one of those whiskeys that I can like drink out of the bottle.
Have you had a Caskmate?
Yeah, Jameson Caskmate. So what they did to produce all across the country, they've also done something really unique I'll get to in a hot second. They took barrels from their distillery after they're finished with them. They send them to craft brewers. The craft brewers age a special beer in those Jameson casks, and then those casks are sent back to Jameson, and then they finish off a unique whiskey in those barrels to get like a stout note or something. So a very like deep chocolatey note in their whiskey, and it's delicious. But what they've also been doing is they partner with certain famous breweries. So New Belgium, or I believe Left Hand Brewing did, and those are both based in Colorado. Left Hand Brewing did one of their fruitier beers in the barrel, like a double IPA or something like that, or an Imperial IPA, and then they sent it back, and then there were special bottles of Jameson whiskey, and I really wanted to try it. I was out in Colorado when it was released, but I didn't get a chance to go to the liquor store. So yeah, it was only a special liquor store, and I couldn't make it. So yeah. Yeah, that was really cool. Trying to think of any other.
Is there a Canadian whiskey that you like?
Some of the higher level Crowns are pretty good. So Crown Royal XR and above, I believe, are all very good Canadian whiskeys.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, those are just aged longer than regular Crown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Sweet.
That those are most of my questions I had for you on the alcohol subject. And so,
all right, man. Well, I think
hopefully they were useful.
Yeah, I think I've talked this subject to death.
Oh no, you haven't.
I know.
You could talk for a while.
I could talk for quite a while on this. Yeah.
Yeah. This might be the first episode where one of us is like legitimately could be probably considered an expert.
I feel both proud and sad that I am the expert on this.
Yeah. No, well, dude, I appreciate it. This is actually really helpful.
Yeah, man. Hopefully
it was helpful to our audience as well. Those of age, obviously.
Yeah.
Drink responsibly as well. And, yeah, so yeah, 10 episodes down. Hopefully, hundreds more in this journey. And we really appreciate you guys sticking with us if you still are. And, yeah, I look forward to, we have some cool stuff coming up that we will be talking about in the next couple of weeks. We'll have some cool kind of audience interaction stuff that's going to be coming up. We're still just figuring out a few details on that.
Yep.
And yeah, if you like what you're hearing, we'd really, really appreciate if you would leave a review and a rating on iTunes. That's really helpful for us. And seriously, just be honest with it. Like, you don't have to give us 5 stars if you don't think we've earned it, but if you think we have, give us 5 stars. And yeah, that's what I had to say. What about you?
I don't really have much else to say. I just want to thank everyone for listening. And if you guys have any other suggestions, like we said, this was technically a suggestion, even though I'm an expert.
Yeah.
Thanks to Drew for sending it our way so that I could have an easy episode for once. And keep firing them away. And
yeah, we got in a bunch, and we appreciate it.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, that's it for now, and yeah, we'll talk to you guys next time.
Keep learning.